A black man stood beneath a stormy sky, soaked and broken, cradling his twin daughters, swearing they'd never taste the racism, hunger, and silence that once swallowed his childhood. She slammed the door so hard that the twin babies screamed. No glance back. Just high heels cracking the pavement of Southside Chicago. She vanished like she'd never mothered them. Kambai stood still, shirtless, holding two wailing lives in his arms that hadn't healed from yesterday's labor. "Let them die," she'd said, and it echoed, louder than the slam. Outside, sirens wailed, and a bus roared past. The world kept spinning, indifferent to another black man left behind. But Kambai was not built to break. He tightened the cloth across his chest, kissed their tiny foreheads, and stepped into the heat with a wheelbarrow and two souls. He didn't walk to survive. He walked to rewrite the prophecy. This isn't a story of poverty. It's a battlefield beneath a father's ribs, where dignity bleeds and love refuses to die. If you're ready, keep watching. But I warn you, this story may not let your heart go. The door didn't just close, it exploded behind her, wood clapping against metal, echoing down the narrow hallway like a gunshot. The crying rose again, twin wails rising from the sagging mattress like sirens. Rita didn't look back. Her shoulders squared, her spine stiff with resentment. She dragged a worn-out suitcase with one broken wheel across the cracked linoleum floor. She had packed fast, without care. A crumpled blouse hung halfway from the zipper. She didn't bother fixing it. Kambai stood still by the window, holding the twins. Their bodies were barely the length of his forearm. One suckled a finger in hunger. The other stared at the ceiling as if it knew what was coming. His shirt was soaked with formula stains and old sweat. Outside, the Chicago wind howled, but inside, it was Rita's silence that froze the room. "You don't have to go," he said quietly. "They need you. I need you." Her face turned slightly, just enough for him to see the sneer. "You needed a job. You needed a plan. What I need is a life." "They're just babies," he whispered. "They're your problem now." And just like that, she vanished. No slamming farewell. No apology. Just her perfume lingering in the air, already turning bitter. And the twins, now screaming again, louder this time, as if even at 3 months, they could sense abandonment, could taste the salt of loss in the air. Kambai sank into the armchair, the one piece of furniture left untouched by the move. He didn't cry, not yet. His lips pressed into each baby's forehead. They were hot, hungry. He needed more than he had. This wasn't the life he had promised her. Rita had married a man with a corporate job and a penchant for clean suits. That man disappeared the day he lost his position at Delmore Construction, a layoff nobody saw coming. One paycheck lost turned into months of unpaid bills, food stamps, judgmental stares from neighbors, and long walks to dollar stores. They had to sell the couch, the TV, the microwave, and the wedding rings. Rita didn't fight poverty. She despised it. She saw it not as a challenge, but as a humiliation, something she was too good for. She began sleeping in silence, waking in anger, criticizing the bland meals, the second-hand clothes, the shared bathroom in the small apartment complex. Every day, she looked at him with less love and more disgust. And today, she left. Kambai didn't blame her. Not fully, but he knew the weight she tossed behind would land squarely on his chest. He had no job, no money, no diapers, and no milk. Just 2 crying girls who knew nothing of survival, only needed. That night, after he rocked them to sleep with a lullaby his mother used to hum in Igbo, he stared at the ceiling, eyes wide, heart numb. He prayed not for money, not even for Rita to return. He prayed for strength. The next morning, hunger pangs were loud again. No food, no formula, no clean bottles. He had $26 to his name. He walked into the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and stared at the reflection of a man everyone else would call a failure. But his girls didn't see that. Not yet. He wrapped them in old scarves, strapped them tight against his chest, one to the front, one to the back. He didn't care how ridiculous he looked. He walked to the local hardware store and rented a rusted wheelbarrow for $5. Then he made his way to the South Side markets where laborers gathered, men with swollen hands and aching backs, waiting for someone to call out, "Hey, help me carry this." He waited. Eventually, someone did. He carried crates, moved watermelons, stacked corn, all with 2 babies strapped to his body. Some people stared. Some pointed. A few smirked. A group of teenage boys called him Super Dad, laughing as they filmed on their phones. An older woman selling oranges looked at him with something else, a mix of sorrow and awe. She walked over, pressed $5 into his palm, and said softly, "For the girls. God sees you." He wanted to cry, but he nodded instead, jaw clenched tight. The worst part came when he passed a couple standing beside a white sedan. The woman, blonde, well-dressed, whispered something too loud to be private. "This is why they have kids they can't feed. And then they expect sympathy." Kambai heard her, but he didn't flinch. He kept walking. That night, after earning $43 from laboring all day, he walked into the pharmacy. The lights inside flickered. The pharmacist looked up and recognized him immediately. The man with twins, the man who never complained. "Milk," Kambai said. "And anything else babies need." The pharmacist said nothing at first. Then he reached under the counter and added a few extra packs, free of charge. At home, the twins drank, finally at peace. He watched them fall asleep, their chests rising slowly, evenly. The quiet brought tears that he had been holding in all day. In the middle of nothing, with the city cold outside and silence inside, he whispered to them, "I have nothing but you. And that means I still have everything." And in that moment, under flickering light and peeling paint, a father was reborn. Not out of pride, not from success, but from something more substantial. Love with no backup plan. The wheelbarrow squeaked with every turn. Its single front tire was swollen and cracked like the soles of old boots. Kambai gripped the metal handles, his fingers stiff from cold and exhaustion, as he pushed it through the alley that opened into 61st and Wentworth, the heart of Chicago's South Side street market. 100 vendors yelled over one another. The air smelled of fried catfish, gasoline, and sweat. Life here didn't stop for sorrow. The twins were strapped to him like a second skin, one on his chest, head bobbing gently with each movement. The other curled on his back, quiet now, but watchful. A few heads turned as he passed. Not with kindness, mostly curiosity. Some smirks, a couple of sneers. There was no space for pity in this part of town. People had buried too many dreams to waste time mourning yours. Still, some faces softened. A young Latino man with a pushcart of mangoes called out, "Respect, hermano," before handing him a slice, free of charge. Kambai accepted it with a nod. His dignity wouldn't allow him to beg, but he would never refuse food meant for his daughters. He moved from stall to stall, offering to lift, stack, unload, reload, anything that required 2 hands and no questions. A middle-aged butcher finally nodded. "Unload these ribs into my freezer," he said, pointing. "You drop one, I dock half." Kambai didn't drop one. By noon, the sun burned hard enough to make the twins whimper. Their small heads were sweating, their tiny legs twitching. He paused, found a sliver of shade beneath a rusted billboard, and sat down. He fed them slowly from the bottle he had prepared that morning, made from powdered milk and boiled water, which was still warm in a thermos tucked beside him. As they drank, he whispered stories, not fairy tales, but truths softened for baby ears. He told them about the grandmother they had never met, about Nigeria, about courage, and he told them they were not born into shame. They were born into fire, and fire, he said, makes diamonds. A few feet away, a group of teenage boys laughed at a video on one of their phones. One glanced up at him and muttered just loud enough, "Look at this broke-ass daddy daycare." Kambai didn't respond, not because he didn't hear, but because he was too focused on the life in his arms. That evening, with $42 in crumpled bills and coins in his pocket, he headed home. But something made him stop outside a closed-down beauty salon where a woman sat on a milk crate, fanning herself with an envelope. She was older, with skin like dark clay and eyes that didn't blink too often. "You work hard," she said without looking up. Kambai paused. "Trying to." She gestured to the twins. "Are they yours?" "Yes, ma'am." "You keep working like that. They'll know what love looks like." He wanted to thank her, but the words choked behind pride. She didn't need gratitude. She just wanted him to know someone was watching, someone believed. That night, the apartment felt different. Not warmer, not safer, but earned, like it belonged to them again. Over the next few weeks, his routine hardened into a ritual. Wake up before dawn, boil water, mix milk, strap the girls, rent the barrow, hustle, return, rock them to sleep, repeat. The market came to know him, not as the man whose wife left, not as the guy with crying kids, but simply as Kambai, the man who never shouted, never begged, never broke, only worked. But even strength has limits. One Monday, the twins both fell sick. Fever, crying, no appetite. Kambai panicked. He carried them to the clinic on 63rd, where the nurse on duty told him the cost of infant care would exceed 2 weeks of his labor. He didn't argue. He only asked, "What's the cheapest medicine to bring the fever down?" She hesitated, then wrote a list. At the pharmacy, he placed each item on the counter with the precision of someone counting on hope. The pharmacist, a young Nigerian man with tired eyes, looked at him and said, "I'll give you the rest on credit." Kambai blinked. "You don't know me." "I don't have to. I know that look. I've seen it in my father." That night, Kambai cried, not because he was weak, but because someone finally saw him, not as a statistic, not as a burden, but as a father. The twins recovered slowly. Life didn't get easier, but it became bearable. One morning, as he tied the final knot on the scarf around his daughter's waist, an elderly neighbor, Mama Roslyn, opened her door and called out, "Boy, let me watch them babies today. You need your back." He hesitated. "I raised 5 sons. 2 made it. 3 didn't. Let me help before these knees give out." That was the first day he walked alone to the market. No weight on his back, but a strange ache in his chest. He kept checking his shoulder, forgetting they weren't there. That evening, when he returned, he found Mama Roslyn on the porch, humming gospel as the twins giggled in her lap. He sat beside her, silence hanging between them. "You are doing well?" she said finally. "Better than good. You're doing God's work." He didn't respond, because inside him something was stirring. Not pain this time, but something softer. Hope. Still fragile, but breathing. And in a world where being black and poor often meant being erased, Kambai was slowly writing his name again. On the arms of his daughters, on the lips of strangers, in the quiet corners of the city that didn't know his story yet but soon would. Because a man like him doesn't disappear. He rises, quietly. But he rises. The morning air held no mercy. It sliced through the cracked window panes like judgment, cold and unrelenting. Inside the room, the floor creaked beneath bare feet. The twins, now nearly walking, toddled toward their father, who was still kneeling in prayer, hands folded so tightly it seemed he might crush something unseen. He hadn't noticed the time. The clock above the stove blinked 7:03 a.m., but his mind had stayed trapped in a space where time didn't exist, only desperation and resolve. The girls came to him, small hands pressing against his back. He turned slowly and scooped them into his arms. He kissed their foreheads with the reverence of a man honoring royalty. Then he whispered, not to them, but to God, "I don't know how, but I will get them there. To that classroom. To that future." The test scores had come in the day before. Amina and Zaria, his twin stars, had shattered expectations. At the top of their class, letters from two of the finest state universities. Full acceptance. One wanted to be a surgeon, while the other aspired to be a pediatrician. They had made it past the first gate. But the second gate was heavier. It had a lock made of tuition fees, textbooks, transportation, food, and housing. Dreams had a price, and it was high. Kambai sat on the edge of the bed that night, the acceptance letters in one hand, a near-empty wallet in the other. The silence of the room weighed like a stone. He didn't cry. He had forgotten how. Instead, he traced the university logo on the paper like a father trying to touch the future. They deserved better than wheelbarrow wages. The next morning, without a word, he left home wearing his only buttoned shirt and his pressed but faded slacks. No babies strapped to him. No rusted barrow at his side. He walked with a purpose that startled even him. Past the market. Past the corner where he usually waited for work. To the edge of Hyde Park, where mansions stood behind iron gates and polished lawns. He stopped in front of a white stone house with pillars like courthouse columns. A man in a tailored robe opened the door, eyebrows lifted at the sight of him. "I'm not selling anything," Kambai began. "I'm here to ask for work." The man folded his arms. "What kind of work?" "Any kind. I'll cook, clean, sweep, wash your dog, wash your car, wash your sins if you need to. Just help me send my girls to college." The man smirked. "People like you don't usually knock here." "I know," Kambai said. "But people like me are the reason houses like this stay clean." The man didn't respond. He simply closed the door. That was the first of 6 houses. 6 gates. 6 refusals. At each one, Kambai offered his hands, his time, his dignity, and each time, he walked away with less of all 3. By the 7th house, his knuckles were bleeding from knocking too hard. His voice had grown hoarse. His shoulders slumped not from physical strain, but from something more profound. The ache of being unseen. Still, he returned home that evening, face calm, eyes tired. Amina and Zaria were waiting at the door, bright-eyed, unaware. "I got you something," he said, handing them 2 used medical books he'd picked up from a street vendor. Their faces lit up like Christmas. That night, while they studied on the floor under the glow of a single lamp, he stared at the ceiling and whispered again, "Just one door, Lord. That's all I need. One door." The following week, he noticed something strange. The girls began leaving the house early and returning late. Their uniforms were still clean, their smiles intact, but something had shifted. They stopped asking him for money. They avoided eye contact when he asked about their day. One night, he followed them from a distance. He found them at a small restaurant on 63rd, aprons tied tightly, serving tables with grace and speed. Customers smiled. Some tipped well. Others didn't look at them twice. Kambai stood at the window, hands in his pockets, pride fighting shame in his chest. When the girls saw him, they didn't panic. They walked over, heads held high. "We couldn't wait any more, Daddy," Zaria said. "We deferred our admission. Just 1 year. We're saving." Amina added, "You've carried us long enough. Let us walk with you now." He wanted to be angry. He tried to protect them, but what came out was a whisper. "I'm sorry I couldn't give you more." "You gave us everything," Amina said, taking his hand. "You gave us your name, your fight, your love." That night, They ate dinner together on the floor, rice and beans, but it tasted like victory. And in the middle of the night, when the wind shook the walls and dreams felt fragile, Kambai stood at the window, looking out into the city. For the first time in years, he didn't feel poor. He felt rich, with daughters who worked not out of desperation, but out of a legacy. He knew now, this wasn't about what he hadn't given them. It was about what he had built in them. He had built a fire. He had built faith. And that was the beginning of everything. The day had started like any other. Bare, simple, full of quiet work. The kind of day you don't expect to change your life. Amina was wiping down a table when she saw it, tucked underneath the last booth in the far corner. A black leather briefcase, pristine, heavy, out of place. "Zaria," she whispered. Her sister came over, brows furrowed. Together they stared at it for a moment, then glanced around the room. The lunch crowd had already left. The place was nearly empty. It didn't belong to anyone they knew. Zaria reached down and pulled it out. It was heavier than it looked. She clicked it open carefully, half expecting papers, but what lay inside stopped her breath cold. Stacks of American dollars. Thick, real, uncounted. Wrapped in bands like they'd just left a vault. Beneath the money, folders, legal-looking, full of seals, signatures, official things neither girl had ever touched. For a few long seconds, the room went silent. The world, in that moment, offered a door wide open. Everything they needed to unlock their future was right there, inside that briefcase. It was enough to cover both their medical degrees, possibly more, and nobody had seen it. Nobody knew they had it. Zaria closed it slowly, the metal latch clicking like a moral verdict. "We should take it home," Amina said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. That night, they sat with their father in the tiny apartment. The briefcase rested between them like a live wire. They told him everything. Kambai listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. Finally, he placed a hand on the case, not to open it, but to feel the weight of the test. "You did the right thing bringing it home," he said quietly. "This doesn't belong to us, and what isn't ours never stays with us for long. It curses more than it blesses." "But Daddy," Zaria whispered, "we could—" "I know," he interrupted. "But if we take what isn't ours, we'll become the people who once looked down on us. That's not who we are. That's not how I raised you." The next morning, the girls arrived at the restaurant early, each with a briefcase in hand. As they approached, they saw a man pacing outside. He looked frantic, dressed too well for the neighborhood, his eyes scanning every passerby. When he saw the girls, he rushed over. "Did you, by chance, find a black case in here yesterday?" His voice cracked with hope. Amina handed it over without a word. The man opened it slightly, exhaled in visible relief, and then looked at them, for the first time. "Thank you," he said, clipped, polite. He turned to leave. Zaria smiled politely. "You're welcome." "No tip?" Amina joked, trying to lighten the tension. He didn't laugh, just nodded, climbed into his sleek black car, and drove off. The girls stood in silence. There was no reward, no miracle, just moral clarity, and it felt a little hollow. "Maybe we're stupid," Zaria murmured. "Maybe," Amina replied. "But we'll sleep well tonight." And they did. Or tried. But fate has a strange way of honoring those who pass its most complex tests. The next afternoon, the man returned. He stepped out of a different car, wearing a more casual suit, his eyes softer this time. "My name is Prince Fei," he said, his accent refined, foreign. "I want to talk." He took them on a drive to Jericho Heights, where tall buildings stood in defiance of the city's harsh history. He led them to one, glass doors, tall ceilings, sunlight pouring through like revelation. "This was going to be leased to a franchise," he said, But I changed my mind. I want it to be yours. The girls stared at him, frozen. You don't know what was in that briefcase, he continued. Those documents were more valuable than the money, and had they gotten into the wrong hands, my family would have been destroyed. You protected us, and now I want to protect your future. They didn't cry immediately, not until he handed them the keys, not until they stepped into that empty building that would soon become their first authentic restaurant, their own space. Their name is on the papers, no boss above them, no shame below them. That night, they ran to their father at the market. He was sitting by his old wheelbarrow, sipping a glass of cold, street-made kunu. When they told him, he didn't speak. He just stared, then slowly placed the glass down. Let's go, he said. They took him there, showed him the place, walked him through the kitchen, the counters, and the rooftop where they dreamed of hanging lights. It's ours, Daddy, Amina said, her voice shaking. Someone finally saw us. Kambai turned toward them. His eyes were wet. No, he said. God saw us. The rest just followed. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the corner of their room, watching them sketch floor plans, price chairs, and list suppliers. The children he once held in his arms were now building something that would carry his name farther than he ever could. And in that moment, he knew poverty had never owned them, because dignity was always theirs. What they held now was proof. The world had tried to bury them in silence, but they had answered with honesty. They had found the door, and instead of kicking it open with greed, they had waited for it to be unlocked by grace. And now it was wide open. It started with a knock, soft, uncertain, almost ashamed. Amina looked up from the cash register. The restaurant was quiet, dusk leaking through the windows, painting the walls gold. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the door. There, standing beneath the flickering porch light, was a woman with skin cracked by time, eyes dulled by regret, and hands that trembled more from shame than age. I'm looking for a job, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I can wash dishes, mop, anything. I just need to work. Amina studied her face. Something in it felt familiar. But the day had been long, and pity was easy when you were tired. She waved her in. You can start tomorrow. No one knew. Not Amina. Not Zaria. Not even the woman herself knew what fate had just unraveled. Her name was Rita, and she was their mother. The same woman who once walked out with no goodbye, no bottle for the babies, no second thought. The same woman who had chosen comfort over blood. She wore sorrow like a scarf, visible but carefully knotted. She never spoke of her past, only worked silently, scrubbing pans as if cleansing sins. At first, no one noticed her presence. She was just another pair of hands in the back room. But slowly, like a bad memory, she began to rise. Amina and Zaria didn't find out until weeks later. It was Kambai who saw her first. He had dropped by after market errands, carrying bags of fresh okra and yams. As he stepped into the kitchen, he stopped mid-stride. There she was, back turned, sleeves rolled up, gray hair tied loosely behind her neck. He didn't speak, just stared. She turned. Time stopped. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the past surged like a storm. The room grew thick with memory. Her face lost all color. Her knees bent slightly, not in greeting, but in guilt. I didn't know they were yours, she whispered. Kambai didn't answer. He turned and walked out. That night, the air in the restaurant felt different, the stillness with a pulse. He called the girls into the office. Sit them down. His voice was soft, but his words were sharp. She's your mother. The silence that followed was not shock. It was a betrayal. Amina stood. My mother is dead. No, he said, eyes full of the kind of pain that never truly heals. She's been working here. Quiet. Trying. Trying? Amina's voice rose. To do what? Rewrite what she erased? Zaria, always quieter, simply wept. When they confronted her the next morning, Rita dropped her clothes, hands shaking. Her eyes begged for mercy she hadn't earned. I didn't come to find you, she said. Life chewed me up. I lost everything. I was ashamed. I didn't know this was your place. I swear. Amina reached into the drawer, pulled out a wad of cash and slammed it on the counter. Take this. Leave. You're not welcome here. But Zaria stepped in front. She's not innocent, Mina. But neither were we when we hated her without knowing. Maybe, just maybe, she's broken too. Amina's chest rose and fell like waves fighting the wind. She left us to die, she said, her voice cracking. Zaria nodded. And yet, here we are, living. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. They let her stay. Not as a family, as staff. For a while, things held together. Rita was quiet, dutiful. She even earned the respect of the younger employees, who affectionately called her Miss R. The customers appreciated her gentle manners, her quiet strength. For a brief moment, it seemed redemption was possible. But time, as always, reveals the cracks. Her temper returned first. Then her voice was sharp, commanding, laced with bitterness. She snapped at staff, corrected customers with a tone too cold for hospitality. The kitchen lost its rhythm. Smiles faded, energy dulled. The girls tried to ignore it. Until one night, Amina found a waitress crying in the storage room. She called me stupid, said I'm nothing but a charity case, that I'll never own anything in my life. The line had been crossed. They sat Rita down, this time as businesswomen, as survivors. We gave you a chance, Amina said. Not out of pity, but principle. You've abused it. Rita scoffed. You're my daughters. I deserve more than this. I birthed you. And Daddy raised us, Zaria replied. We became women without you. Her voice shook, but her resolve held. You will not undo what we built. Rita exploded. Years of frustration poured out like boiling oil. He poisoned you against me. Your father made me the villain while he got to play the saint. You think he's noble? He's weak. That was it. The name of their father in her mouth, twisted with venom, unforgivable. You can leave now, Amina said, voice flat. Rita stormed out, rage echoing behind her. But the girls didn't leave her empty. They bought her a small convenience stand on the edge of town, gave her everything she'd need to run it. Not because she earned it, but because they refused to become like her. In the weeks that followed, the restaurant breathed a sigh of relief. Laughter returned. Staff danced between tables. Customers stayed longer and tipped more. Hope had roots again. But deep inside, Amina and Zaria carried a new weight. Not hate, grief. For the mother they never had. For the love that was never real. For the goodbye that never truly ended. And yet, they pressed on. Because survival isn't just staying alive. It's choosing not to harden. It's letting light in, even after darkness tried to raise you. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the grand hall of the new Twins of Grace Global flagship in downtown Atlanta. It wasn't just a restaurant opening. It was a coronation, a legacy enshrined. Kambai sat in the front row, dressed in a white agbada hand-stitched with golden embroidery, his silver beard trimmed, his eyes moist but proud. On either side stood Amina and Zaria, radiant in custom Ankara gowns that paid homage to their roots, but declared boldly that they were no longer poor girls from South Side Chicago. They were architects of a revolution. Journalists had flown in from New York and Lagos. CNN, Essence, and even the BBC had cameras rolling. But it wasn't the media they cared about. It was what this night meant. Not just for them. For every single black father who stayed, who loved, who worked without applause. For every daughter who dared to dream beyond the walls of public housing and racial ceilings. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, "tonight we celebrate the extraordinary journey of two daughters and the man who carried them on his back through hell and brought them home." A screen lowered from the ceiling. A video began to play. A father rocking crying infants in a cramped apartment. A wheelbarrow rolling through a sunburned market. Twin girls asleep on his chest as he loaded sacks for pennies. A tearful prayer whispered at night. A restaurant lit by candles during power cuts. And then, hope. Growth. A line of customers out the door. Scholarships. Branches. Joy. When the lights returned, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Amina stepped to the microphone. Her voice was steady, low, and intimate. "Tonight isn't about food. It's about faith. It's about a man who had every reason to quit, but chose love instead. My father didn't raise daughters. He raised giants. And now, it's our turn to honor the ground he walked so we could run." Zaria joined her, voice trembling. "And Mama Ron, the woman who said yes when no one else did. Tonight, the chef's hall is renamed in your honor. You didn't birth us, but you mothered us." The hall erupted in applause as Mama Ron, now in her 80s, was wheeled to the stage, tears falling freely. Then came the final surprise. "We're proud to announce," Amina said, "that Twins of Grace is launching its international branch in London next spring. But before that, we want to honor the man behind it all." She turned to Kambai. "Daddy, we bought you a home. No more renting, no more wheelbarrows. You are the king of this story, and kings deserve castles." The hall stood. Kambai covered his face, shaking, overwhelmed. Ruth held his hand. A nation watched a father cry, not from pain, but from vindication. The crown was his now, not of gold, but of grace. Some stories are meant to be heard, but this one is meant to be felt. Behind the laughter and triumph, this was a story of being abandoned, and choosing not to abandon. A story of rising not despite pain, but because of it. A story that asks each of us, when the world hands you scars, can you still build a crown? Zaria and Abini didn't just survive. They transformed every rejection, every tear, every insult thrown at their skin, their poverty, their dreams, into something powerful. Not fame, not fortune, but purpose. And maybe, just maybe, you've been carrying your pain in silence. Perhaps you too were once left behind. Maybe no one clapped when you stood back up. If this story has touched something profound in you, don't let it go. Drop your thoughts below. Share your truth. Share this story with someone who needs a light at the end of their tunnel. And if you want more stories that don't just entertain, but awaken, subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.